So if you'd like to welcome Dan Lake, he's VP of Technology for Not on the High Street. Thank you, Dan. And he's talking about the balancing act, strategic planning for effective engineering delivery. Thanks, Dan. Take it away.
Yeah, great segue from the last question there, talking about balance. Hello, I'm Dan. I'm the last speaker of the night. We're nearly there. I lead technology and products at Not on the High Street. We're a UK-based marketplace, home to over 5,000 small creative brands. We curate the brands and the products in order to ensure quality and trust for our customers. And that's the key differentiating factor in what separates NOS from other online marketplaces. We've heard this evening from our other speakers about methods you can deploy to develop brilliant products and experiences, why quality is important in that journey, and the importance of clarity and collaboration. But from what I've experienced, more often than not, strategic thinking tends to be pushed to the left of the product cycle. And what I want to talk to you about is a couple of methods I've deployed to extend the thinking into the delivery phase. As with everything in life, it's about healthy balance. Paraphrasing exactly what Mark just said. But before I get into the theory, I'd like to start with a story. I joined the business just under 2 years ago. And during the interview process, I was obviously keen to understand the platform, stack, and the team. Most of the answers I got from the board and other senior leaders could be summarised as the platform's complicated and the team is slow to deliver. My question back to people was usually, okay, why's that? And I very rarely got a logical answer. Not a unique problem by any stretch, but one that proved to be much bigger than expected. For any of you in the room that have joined an organisation as a senior leader, you'll know that trust is typically called into question during a change in leadership. So your first priority is to start to build trust. So the first thing I tend to do is try to understand the team's problems, blockers, and their lived experience of working in their role. Like a therapy session, I try to encourage a full amnesty of things on people's mind. What I hadn't banked on was the litany of woes that I got back. In one way, this was really good. I had stuff to work with. But during the first 2 weeks of discovery, I found myself doing this quite a bit. From the discovery sessions, what was crystal clear was the sheer size of the divide between technology and the business. There was even a sizable divide between tech and product. And the engineering team had been wrapped in cotton wool and put on a pedestal, shielded from the realities of the business. I never questioned an engineer culture had bred a fiefdom, that they'd grown apart from the state of the market and our purpose as a business. And as a result, we were building too much of the wrong stuff. 18 years of this mindset has unsurprisingly led to a hugely oversized and overcomplicated platform that's now an anchor to progress. And all of this became a distraction from what really made a difference to everyone, and everyone in the business was frustrated. A lack of strategy and acknowledgement of the problem is a big contributing factor to this, but in reality, the age-old output-based mentality really led the teams to closing themselves off, doing what they thought was the right thing. NOS overcomplicates what it does. We're no different to any other organisation in this. People fill up slides and meetings with acronyms and overcomplicated language, and when that happens, most people don't know what the fuck's going on. And for us, the raft of acronyms, overcomplicated modelling, and no real connection to what engineers care about resulted in a lack of commercial awareness in the decisions the teams were making. This then compounded a lack of understanding on what the teams actually do, and fostered a distrust that they work on the things that are important for the business. Everyone was basically debating surface level things, battling to prove their stuff was more important, and just resulted in unhappy people on all sides. Now, I'm a simple guy. A guiding principle of mine is to keep things simple and get rid of the fluff. Obviously, when speaking with all of your different stakeholders about product and technology things, you have to draw connections to the things that they value. But fundamentally, simplicity breeds clarity. So with all that considered, the first step seemed obvious, and I took the opportunity to unleash some simplicity. Businesses exist to generate money. They may have a purpose or mission, but this really just defines how they spend that money. It's no more complicated than that. For everyone employed by the business, there are only 3 categories of work to consider. You have to make money, you have to not spend it all, and you have to protect what you keep. This may seem pretty obvious, but every time I explain this, there's a visible weight lifted. And it opens the doors to exposing engineers and technologists to the idea that their time represents an investment of revenue. And they're accountable for ensuring that revenue is well spent. Now, timesheets and time tracking is a contentious subject, and I've seen them used very badly in different organisations, but they are quite useful for understanding just how much money it's cost the business to release a product or an iteration. But I'll call it out. They should absolutely not be used as a stick to beat people with, but more as a data source for iterative improvements in the planning and execution to achieve the same customer outcome for less money. Some of you here may work for an organisation that internally charges other departments or budgets for work. This is also a great way to get this data, but seldom is that data used to make it cheaper, or even better, to not spend at all. And I have personally never seen that drive to spend less come from an engineer. This was very evident when looking through some of our capitalisation reports. The engineering fiefdom and lack of strategy meant we were spending way too much money on things with little value. For example, a particular EKS migration project went on for 2 years and cost us over £600,000 in time. The migration itself is valuable to the operation of our platform, but with the time we spent realising that value, it takes a very long time to pay back. And to this day, trying to explain what Elastic means, or what Kubernetes does to a board, is entirely pointless. And we migrated a load of services we probably should have killed off. Now, simply pointing this out gets us nowhere. It doesn't speak to the things that engineers care about, but in a quest to empower people and push decisions down an organisation, it's important for us as leaders, we find a way to help people care. So from that, I introduced the highly scientific triangle of things engineering give a shit about. And the inescapable problem in software engineering, balance between new investments and keeping the existing software functional. The triangle represents the 3 core elements that are usually on tech and product teams' minds. And typically, only one of these elements features on the radar of the rest of the business. And as a result, it's usually the only one that receives any financial value. So what happens when the business is focused solely on customer value and has no concept or mental model to understand the other 2 elements? Well, the triangle breaks apart and one of 2 things happen. Debt management efforts and the health of the delivery process catch fire, which feels okay in the short term because you're delivering what the business thinks it wants and people are happy. But it's short-lived, and it very quickly bites you in the arse. Your roadmaps become entirely about managing complexity, unplanned work and interruptions, and maybe a tiny bit of existing capability enablement, but very little customer value. Oh, the irony. Or, teams hyperfixate on tech debt and engineering health and separate themselves from the product and customer value. This feels okay to engineers and can be useful in short bursts, but ultimately alienates the whole department from the business. And the value of capable product managers and engineers gets called into question, because you end up spending large amounts of money on things the business doesn't understand and engineers are terrible at explaining. And yet again, customer value suffers. This is closer to what had happened at Knots, but somewhat impressively, we've managed to do both at the same time. The interaction across all 3 elements is what's fundamental to achieving some form of balance and sustainable technical product development. However, when teams first try to balance the work, it usually ends up being a prioritisation call between 2/3 of the work the business doesn't understand and 1/3 of the work the business does and believes is the only work to be done. Inevitably, this doesn't go well. And in doing that, you've just delayed the fires a little longer, pretending you're balancing things, and you've solved nothing. In order to really tackle the problem, you need to reframe the landscape. You need to draw a picture that, in a way that builds trust with engineers and the business using simplicity and clarity. What if the business really understood the jobs to be done and didn't switch off every time the lead engineer was talking about that damn EKS migration? What if engineers had a set of metrics and terminology that helped them to understand their business impact instead of just the efficacy of their team and process? Now, DORA and SPACE are a great metric frameworks for teams to use, but they are lagging indicators and not great at providing a view on the business impact to finance types. Well, I'm here to tell you there is a way to solve this. We all love a framework in tech and product, so I introduced the literally named Balance Framework. And it's pretty simple. All initiatives, epics, stories, tasks, bugs, etc. can be categorized in one of four ways. Once you've categorized the work, you can measure where investments have been placed historically, and you can see trends, and a story as to why now you're more than likely just keeping the lights on. As you can see, it gives a great basis for talking about work using simplified language and terms that most senior leaders care about. It reframes the interaction between customer value, technical debt management, and engineering health, and simplifies the language, giving a simple mental model for what was previously a pretty complicated explanation. It enables you to talk about how time invested in productivity pays off later down the line, and if you've got the measurements right, it enables you to say exactly when. It starts a conversation about further visibility into what goes into keeping the lights on, and removes the tech and product air gap by showing that all of this work makes up a digital product, not just the features. And looking forward, it enables you to help teams make elective investments in a way that makes sense for engineers and product management, and is also understandable for the rest of the business. Now, we've only just started measuring against the framework at NOTS, and surprise, surprise, we look a bit more like this. The interesting thing is that we've proven that absolute focus on new things for long periods of time will only ever result in this. And this is not a good use of what is usually the most expensive team for any company. The implementation is pretty simple. We use a measurement tool, which I won't name because it's not a sales pitch, that pulls data needed to measure the engineering metrics from a GitHub integration and the work management information from Jira. We've simply introduced a field in Jira to allow product and engineering managers to select the category at a ticket level, and the tool does the rest. The harder part is how you use the data and introduce the categories into planning processes to add a simplified lens on product roadmaps. And there's usually a cultural change involved, which is hard, but well worth the effort. Although there's no ideal state or specific numbers to hit, KTLO will take the larger proportion of your time. After all, you have your entire product's history to maintain. However, overtly committing to chunks of time in your roadmaps to improve productivity in order to decrease cycle time, and celebrating the win when you do, or having an open conversation about the financial outcomes of KTLO balanced against new things, and the connection to company KPIs or goals breaks down so many barriers to understanding what tech do and why. As with everything in life, it isn't a silver bullet, and you still need to put in the hard graft as a leader to fix the other, let's call them anti-agile behaviours. But breaking down barriers with simplicity and drawing connections to the things that the rest of the business care about will build trust. And never underestimate the importance of trust. Now, I have another little bit of simplicity to share with you. The balance framework helps us to understand how to balance the investments we're making across providing customer value, tech debt management, and engineering health. And it gives us a great framework for understanding the business impact of product and technology teams. But what it doesn't do is help us to decide on the investments we shouldn't make, and those are more important. I bet that most of you in this room feel like there's currently too much stuff on your roadmaps, or trying to get onto your roadmaps. And sometimes it's really hard to make that no stick. Well, consider this. If businesses exist to generate money, then all the work would fall somewhere on one of two axes. Work should either contribute to the operational performance of the business, or should be strategically important and move us towards the company goals or strategy. Now, obviously, if a piece of work ranks high on both axes, then that's your core work. Things you should absolutely be invested in and a great use of you and your team's time. Conversely, if a piece of work ranks low on both fronts, then obviously you shouldn't even be considering it. This is true of both new work you shouldn't do, but also existing systems, services and features that you really should remove in order to optimize your operations or your customers' experience. We're currently doing this exact thing. Our platform's too big and too complex, so removing some of the fluff and stuff that actually just slows us down is an important first step. The more interesting conversations happen when a piece of work ranks highly on either axis, but not both. There's slightly different definitions to both of these, so it's key to apply your own context, budgets, and thinking in these decisions. But if something's high on strategic importance, but low on contribution to operational performance, then it's a good opportunity to increase your efficiency as a team or in an existing product to achieve it. Alternatively, partner with an organisation that has the capability. Buy over build. If something's high on contribution to operational performance, but not strategically important, then either buy the capability or outsource the effort. Now, life is not as simple as I make out here. But as a technology leader, in whatever capacity, it's so important you have a healthy conversation about this. Parkinson's law dictates that work will always expand to fill the capacity you give it. So never fool yourself into thinking you'll reach a steady pace without this kind of prioritization. And what we've done historically is fool ourselves into thinking everything is in the top right. We've built literally everything. That's now manifesting as an anchor to progress. And we're retrospectively admitting that there's a large amount of stuff that sits bottom left and needs to be unpicked. If you've got the luxury of avoiding this bear trap, then do so early. None of this is magic. It's basically reframing the conversation and giving you a simpler view to have a better conversation with stakeholders and teams. But get these right and magical things can happen. Engineering and product teams have frameworks to think about how they spend their time, what they should and shouldn't care about, and how we might reframe the build versus buy debate. The business has a better understanding of how technology and product teams operate and has a better visibility into the jobs to be done. Everyone has a common language, measurements, and reporting to base conversations around. And the business can see that technology and product do actually care about the commercials. Trust is built, and people take accountability for the metrics that are actually important to the business, as well as the ones important to engineering. And you, as a leader, have built a sustainable approach to empowering teams to build and run the things that matter to your organisation. Thank you very much for your time. If I've timed things well, which I think I have, I should have some time for some questions now. But if you'd like to know more and don't want to ask now, feel free to reach out on LinkedIn or grab me after the event.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Dan. You've been blinded there. Have we got any questions for Dan right now? Brilliant. I'll come round. Thank you. I feel like challenge Annika.
Thanks. That's a good talk. Quick question on the renaming of technical debt and recategorizing it. Did you notice a difference in attitude or approach to that work? I think back to sort of where we're at, we have a certain proportion that needs to go into each sprint, which is technical debt. By recategorizing it into keeping the lights on and productivity and all that sort of stuff, have you seen a difference in attitude in tackling that?
Yeah, massively. I think the biggest shift is all of a sudden there's a light bulb moment for a lot of people. So I obviously won't name names and roles, but in my role and what I do now, I have someone that I work with day in, day out that's on perhaps the exact opposite end of the agile spectrum to where I am. So conversations with them about kind of investing in our pipelines or kind of spending time in that EKS migration that I kind of I talked about purely just boils down to money and what is the ROI, what is the kind of top line TTV revenue that would come from that, which is a really hard conversation when you're investing in technical debt and kind of investing in your productivity going forward. So just shifting it into those 4 categories instantly just gives you the platform that makes a lot more sense. When you talk about actually I'm spending time in productivity, that has a, although perhaps not calculatable kind of instantly in your head value, that has a perceived value that actually we're going to speed up as a result, and you can measure those kind of things. So it isn't, like I said, there's no kind of magic or brand new way to kind of explain certain problems that engineering have, but there is just a much simpler way to reframe everything that goes on within digital product development, and it's just a light bulb moment, and it just opens up trust and relationships and conversations. Sorry, I'm squinting, I can't actually see where you are, but...
Thank you very much. Excellent. In fact, can you just pass the microphone down there?
Thank you. You mentioned the importance of reframing what success looks like for the development teams or technology and aligning them to the customer outcomes. So I'm just wondering if you've got any examples of some of those success metrics that technology teams can measure that directly link to that customer value.
I haven't necessarily got any examples that link directly to customer value, but the kind of whole premise is to actually talk about all of the things that go into realising that customer value sustainably and repeatedly and predictably. So the challenge that I'm trying to break is that age-old kind of prioritisation. I mean, it was really bad when I first joined Not on the High Street, in that literally we had 2 separate roadmaps. We had engineering priorities and we had product priorities. So the whole conversation was like, you're all building the same stuff. Like, it's all a product. So it really is from one extreme to the other. So this really fits in with that mindset of actually all of these things calculate to customer value in some way, shape or form. So not necessarily examples of where we've kind of like calculated particular customer value. It's more about the kind of way that you talk about how you get to that. And it's not saying it's a different way to do product management or a different way to prioritize your roadmaps, but we've got, we use Jira Product Management, and we've got the age-old kind of now, next, later. We're adding in just a filtered view of like how we might look at that now, next, later across our various different products, but also then filter that by these balanced categories. So we can predict actually if we're going to spend a quarter invested into productivity, and it just makes it a lot easier to explain why we've got 3 teams of engineers working on our CI pipeline, why we're doing that and not building this new kind of shiny button. Like, it just makes a much easier conversation. So it's not necessarily about that kind of measuring the customer value. It's more about actually bringing everyone along with you and stopping those internal battles that you will always have with finance types or marketing's wish list of stuff that they need engineering to do and all that kind of stuff.
Thank you. That makes sense. More about the narrative.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have we got any final questions? Well, that was absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much, Dan. Big round of applause.